One of the best things that you can do in terms of peak performance running is to always focus on the things that you yourself as an athlete have control over. You don't have control over what the weather's going to be like. You don't have control over delays that go on either in traffic or getting to the course or anything like that. You only have control over how you pace yourself in the races, what you're telling yourself prior to your race, what you're telling yourself in training as well. And so peak performance running really comes down to smarter training, smarter tactics that you can use in your preparation rather than worrying and stressing over the things that are outside of your control. Obviously, you are in control of how you pace yourself in the race. That's why I always preach, if you want a peak performance running result, then you have to make sure that you're following through on running tactfully in the race. Don't run out of energy too soon in the race and hit that so-called wall that we've all experienced in some form in some time in our training. You don't have to hit the wall. What you do have to do is make sure you're monitoring your energy expenditure in the race, not going out way too aggressive, getting too hyped up, running someone else's race, and going too anaerobic too early in the race. Obviously, how you set up your training in terms of amount of time you're training for your goal race, a bigger, longer buildup is always going to be more beneficial to the athlete versus a very short buildup, say like an 8-week buildup versus a 24-week buildup. Because an 8-week buildup, you're trying to get into great anaerobic shape, aerobic shape, also mentally prepared to run a new personal best in a very short amount of time. So my recommendation is always, especially if you're focused on peak performance running, is to focus on a longer buildup. Okay, if you're training for anything further than a 10K, half marathon, 10-miler marathon, focus on a minimum of 16 weeks, but preferably 24 weeks in length. I always did this. I always would do a minimum of 4 months, but most of the time it was between 5 and 6 months that I would personally train for my races. And I definitely credit that in helping me get to a point where I could run under 2 hours and 20 minutes for the marathon and, breaking 51 minutes for the 10-mile distance. Obviously, you have to utilize what you have, and that is your drive and motivation. Okay, not every athlete is incredibly gifted in terms of their genetic ability. Most of us don't have the ability to go out and run sub 5-minute mile pace and produce a very small amount of lactic acid buildup as we're running. Okay, most of these world-class athletes do have a very high tolerance for pain, but so do other people that don't have as much physiological ability. But the fact that they can produce a very small amount of lactic acid running at very high paces does put them in an advantage versus someone that doesn't have that ability in terms of their genetic ability. That being said, don't let that dishearten you as an athlete. Okay, it just means that we as athletes that have a smaller amount of lactic or smaller amount of talent just have to make up for that with a longer period of time in order to prepare for our races and to really get to that point where we get that peak performance running result that we've been seeking. And for me personally, it took me over 15 years to run a 2:19 marathon versus somebody else that has a high amount of genetic capability that can probably run under a 2:20 marathon just about every few months or every other month. And I just didn't have that type of genetic ability, but I did have a very high workload output. I was able to, and I really had a high drive for success. You have to use that, use the gifts that you've been given. And what's up here is much more powerful than just the physical training. That's why I always talk about, if you're seeking peak performance running results, you have to combine both the physical preparation with the mental preparation. So start spending about 10 minutes of your day visualizing yourself, seeing yourself performing the way you want to perform in the race, and start telling yourself that, what you tell yourself, what you say outward, what you say inward will reflect the type of results that you get. And as an athlete, you really have to be cognizant of the words you're telling yourself if you're beating yourself up over workouts or races that didn't match up to your expectations, change that. Instead of saying, man, I didn't achieve what I wanted, change that mindset to, okay, I didn't get the result that I wanted, but I did get a really strong anaerobic boost from that workout or that race that I went out and performed at. Okay, I didn't get the time specifically that I wanted at that time, but I did get a huge physiological boost from that workout or that race that I participated in. See what I'm saying? I mean, it's just you're changing up the words, you're changing up your mindset. And if you do this over a long period of time and you stay in the routine of watching the words that you use, the words that you think, the things that you're telling yourself, that's going to produce a peak performance running result in due time. Okay? You have to have a belief in delayed gratification. It's just not fast results in this sport as a middle to long distance runner. It just doesn't work that way. I mean, I had so many disappointments over my career. I mean, I started running in 1992 as a freshman in high school, and I competed all the way up to 2018. I ran my personal best for the marathon when I was 31 years old in 2007. Pretty much all of my personal best were really run between 2007 and 2010. And so I experienced just as much disappointment over the years as just about any other athlete out there. And what drove me to get to that point where I could compete with Kenyan athletes or other world-class athletes was just that drive and determination to persist over a long period of time. So peak performance running really comes down to that tenacity. You know, how badly do you want success? Because if you're just in this to be mediocre, then go out and run 1 or 2 days a week and stop running for a few days and then start back up. You have to be consistent with what you're doing. You cannot just be interested in success if you want to be a stellar middle to long distance runner. You have to be white hot, razor sharp focused in this sport to get to the next level. Okay, if you're a 5-hour marathoner right now and you're trying to get to 3:45 and you're wanting to break that 4-hour marathon, you have to continually practice running under 9:09 mile pace or 5:41 kilometer pace. You have to get comfortable with that pace in order to drop from 5 hours down to 3:45, which is, and 3:45 is much faster than 9:09 or 5:41. That's just sub 4-hour marathon pace. So the goals that we set, we have to have some realistic expectations of not only the work output that's involved, but the tenacity and drive and motivation you are really going to need in order to produce that peak performance running result that you're seeking. You know, I had times where I DNF'd in races. I hated that. Only happened a few times in my career, but as a marathoner, I had times where I performed, piss poor in track races and in road races. And then I had all those times where I succeeded. I remembered those disappointments where I just did not perform at the level that I wanted. But looking back, I was trying to perform at a level that I just was not physically or mentally prepared at that time to produce. And so peak performance running really is about not only being strategic in how you're training, the length and duration of the amount of time you're preparing for your goal event and the goal race that you're going for, but also being patient. Okay, there's far too many of us that want results far too fast, and we don't realize the extent of the work that's going to be involved in order to get to that peak performance running result. And so as an athlete, I just wanted to share with you all that it is possible to get to that point where you can set that new personal best and you can sustain that goal pace that you're aiming for. But just make sure that you're being strategic in how you set up your training. You're following a legitimate plan. Get a mentor. That's why I make these videos. I do mentor so many athletes around the world that are seeking to run a new personal best or trying to drop a time that they're currently running. Maybe it's something psychological, something that you're doing either prior to or in your training that's leading to that result that continues to happen in the race. Okay, maybe you've had in the past problems sustaining pace and you feel like that's going to continue. You have to change up your strategy. You have to start looking at that pace that I want to sustain from start all the way to the finish of the race. And if that percentage is too low, You have to be honest with yourself and say, hey, this is the reason why I'm not reaching that peak performance running result that I've been working toward. Okay, I'm just spending too much time running aerobically. Okay, yes, I'm very fit. Yes, I'm very strong in terms of my endurance, but the strength and stamina is what's getting me in the race. I'm not able to sustain the pace with my competitors, or maybe I'm paying too much of attention to my competitors in the race, and I'm not focusing on what I need to focus on myself. I'm trying to go out faster than I need to with my competition, and maybe what I need to do is go out a little bit more conservative, okay, and then really attack in the last half of that race. Okay, it's always better to run a negative split rather than a positive split if you can. It's not to say that you can't run a new personal best with a positive split. You can go out much faster in the first half of your race and then run much slower in the second half. Okay, I did that myself. I went out 112 or 107.09 through the first half of my marathon and came back with a 112.26. So several minutes slower in that second half, but I set a new personal best and broke 220. So and that's just one of millions of examples of other athletes that have done that. But it's also you have a higher chance of succeeding, in my opinion, if you're a little bit more conservative in the early stages of your race and then really pour it on when everybody else is really labored that have gone out way too fast. Okay, peak performance running is also about your nutrition. You absolutely have to pay attention to your hydration in practice so that when you get to the race, you've practiced that so many times every single weekend for your long runs, and you've practiced taking in gels that you know how much fluid and caloric intake that you can take in the race because you've done that so many times routinely in training. Most athletes out there, and you may be one of them, I know I was in the early stages of my own career, that think that they can run these longer races without drinking or taking in calories. Nutrition and hydration in these races are absolutely critical, especially in these longer races, 10K up to the marathon. If you're running a mile on the track or 1,500 or an indoor 3K or 5K outdoors, that's a little different because the race is over so quick. But anything really from 10K up, your nutrition and your caloric intake is really what's going to produce. If you're paying attention to it and if you're improving it, that is really going to help you produce a peak performance running result. Where you get in that flow state where just everything feels effortless, where the pace doesn't feel so labored to you, and you're able to pick up the pace, and preferably you're hurting really bad in the last couple miles or the last few kilometers of a race, rather than the first few kilometers or the first few miles of your race. That is what we don't want. And so peak performance running, it's about tenacity. It's about staying persistent and consistent with your training, staying hungry for what you want, and not just being mediocre with your training, and really staying focused on your preparation and knowing that there's going to be ups and downs throughout your training. There's going to be times where you're going to doubt yourself. There's going to be times where you feel like you're past your prime, or you just don't have what it takes. Get past those limiting results. Change your mindset. And when you notice yourself telling yourself something negative, immediately stop that and fill your mind with positive, productive words. Okay, make sure you're changing what you're saying to yourself and what you're thinking. I think that is a big step in the right direction in terms of helping you to produce a peak performance running result. So I hope this video is helpful for you all. Leave a comment below if you have any other questions or concerns regarding this topic or any topic you'd like me to cover in my next video. And definitely check out the resources below all of these videos, as well on RunDreamAchieve.com. They're definitely there to help take you to the next level in your training. I know if you stay consistent, you start changing up your tactics in terms of how long you're training for your races, rather than trying to cram all of your training in a short amount of time, your chances of producing a peak performance running result is going to skyrocket. Your chances of success are also going to definitely increase because, again, you're studying and you're critiquing what the world's best distance runners, or those runners that you admire, you're critiquing what they're doing, and you're going to implement some of those tactics in your own preparation. That will get you a peak performance running result. So I hope this was helpful, and I'll talk to you all in the next video.